My story. It's been an amazing story. As much as I've lived the 55 years I have, my spiritual journey started at the age of 31. I was on my way to Regent's College to attend an NLP workshop. Regular day, just like any other day. But as I left that NLP workshop, I had this overwhelming desire to stop and buy a pen and a notebook. I've never felt like that my whole life. It was an overwhelming urge, and so I did what that feeling prompted me to do, and I waited in line at a newsagent's. I risked missing my train home and having to wait another hour in London because I knew I had to start writing. So I grabbed myself a pen, I grabbed myself a notebook, and on the train journey home, I started writing down everything I could about my day, about the people I'd met, about the insights I'd had. I had no idea then that the content of the diaries I started keeping that day would become content for my subsequent books. A hell of a lot happened. If you want the full story, I highly recommend my first book, Medium Rare. It's on special at the moment on the website, just $10. It's an amazing read. It's been on the bestsellers list here in New Zealand. So what happened for me was I started seeing dead people. It started with my grandfather. My grandfather was just this big in the middle of my chest. I then saw my grandmother. It was grandmother's head as I remembered her, but on a body of white light. Like if you were to freeze ice and it goes white like that, it was just like that. She came for my grandfather from Spirit World. My grandfather had never gone to Spirit World, even though he was deceased. He was with me in my body, making my decisions, but I didn't know that. I thought the voices in my head were me. How wrong could I be? You want to know more about that? You have to read the book. So what happened for me? I saw Granddad, I saw Grandma. That was pretty cool. I know them both, I love them. But the next day I started seeing Spirit World. It was as though this veil had been lifted, leaving me able to see into the spiritual dimensions. It was good, it was bad. There was tears, there was laughter. I was worried I was losing my mind. Could have quite easily thrown myself under a bus if I continued to have that experience. When I opened up to Spirit World, it was like everybody was shouting at me. I could put my fingers in my ears and the voices didn't stop. I had no quality of life. If I'd ended my life at that point, nobody would have known why. But it was a massive opening to spiritual realities that I experienced. As a result of what I went through, I found myself praying like I'd never prayed before. I wasn't brought up with particular religious parents, but we did religious instruction in school. And I would say that my family were believers in God, but we didn't necessarily go to church. We certainly believed in the philosophy of treat others as you would expect to be treated. Be kind, be good, don't lie, don't steal. So we were brought up with spiritual practices, but not as churchgoers. But when I started experiencing Spirit World, I started praying like I'd never prayed before. And my prayers were answered by getting to meet the first of two guides that I have met physically. So not in my mind's eye, not in a meditative state. I was functioning as normal on a train on the London Underground. And I met the first of my guides. He had white hair, a very kindly face, vivid blue eyes that I will never forget. And as he met me, and there's a bit more to it than I'm telling now, this is the Abridged Virgin, he said to me that I was here as a healer and a teacher, and he told me not to forget the ones that can't see. The ones that can't see can still feel the vibration. Now at the time, at 31, that was a really cryptic message. I didn't understand what he meant. Now, when you see my live shows, working with psychic surgeons, spiritual psychic surgeons, it all makes sense. You can't necessarily see what's happening. I can see what's happening. The audience can't, but the audience can still feel the vibration. Even communicating with Spirit World, as I pass on a message from their loved ones, the recipient and the people around them, their hairs stand on end. We can feel the vibration. So, as a result of that interaction, this guide that I'd never met before had said to me, I was here as a healer and a teacher Don't forget the ones that can't see. The ones that can't see can still feel the vibration. As a result of that, I took myself off as the logical, practical person that I am and was back then to attend a workshop on how to heal. So I trained with the National Federation of Spiritual Healers. I trained with an incredible couple, Jack and Jan Angelo. I highly recommend them if you're thinking of wanting to train as a healer. They are both amazing beings. And I learnt how to meditate, and I learnt how to sense energy. I learnt about chakras, I learnt about meridians. It was an amazing weekend. I actually did 2 weekends with them. I enjoyed the first one so much, I went back for the second. And I became qualified as a healer with the National Federations of Spiritual Healers in the UK. I'm now recognised by the National Federation of Spiritual Healers in New Zealand as well. Anyway, long story short, sometime afterwards, I was on a workshop, an NLP workshop at Regent's College in London, and I was assisting on the workshop. So on the workshop, you have the lead trainer, you have assistant trainers, often brought in from overseas, you have assistants, which I was one of a group of, and then you have the delegates. And I was an assistant on that workshop. Morning of day one, we all introduced ourselves, and being a bank manager, as I was at the time, sounds pretty boring. And so I slipped in there that I'd done a training workshop with the National Federation of Healers. Little did I know there was somebody on that workshop that had a really, really, really bad back. And so at the first coffee break, he made a beeline for me and said, "Would you mind fixing my back?" So when this man that I'd never met before approached me and said, "Can I fix your back?" I said, "No, you've misunderstood me. I'm not a healer. I'm a bank manager. I've done a workshop. I've done 2 workshops with the National Federation of Spiritual Healers, but I'm not a professional healer." And he said, "Well, I don't care. I'm in agony with my back. I've made a commitment to the trainer to be here as an assistant like you are, and if you don't help me, I won't be able to help, and then there'll be, there won't be enough assistants for delegates, and you'll all have to have bigger groups, and it'll mess everything up for the main trainer." And so I relented. First of all, I said, "But I haven't got a table to put you on." He says, "I don't mind. I'll lay on the ground." And so that's what happened. At the end of this day in Regent's College, he laid in the training room on the ground, and I knelt down. Now, I did exactly what I'd been taught on my National Federation of Spiritual Healers course. I put one hand to the top of the spine and one hand to the base of the spine, and internally you say a prayer. As a healer, we recognize that we are not the healing. That the term healer is actually a misnomer, because all healing comes from God, from a higher power, from Great Spirit, whatever you want to call it. Don't get caught up in the name, but it comes through us from a higher power. So calling ourselves healers is actually incorrect, because we're channels, we're instruments. So as I knelt and I asked for the healing, a man's voice, clear as day, from behind me, over the shoulder, said, "Right, now we're going to teach you how to really heal." And I was in shock. I didn't dare open my eyes, but I was in shock. And my brain focused on this one word, "we're." We're, meaning not I, we, meaning more than one. I opened my eye, and Nick, who had been laying face down with his arms at his side like this, his arms had been stretched out in front of him, and his spine was starting to crack. And he was starting to moan, and he expressed some concern about what was happening to him. And I said, out of my mouth without thinking, "It's absolutely fine, they know what they're doing." And in my mind I was thinking, oh my goodness, what's happening? I was in panic, but I knew that him panicking was not going to help. So I was amazed at the calmness in my voice when I said, "It's okay, they know what they're doing, it's all going to be fine." So what then happened was, the man's voice that was out here, now as a medium, I recognise there are voices in my head. Some maybe my thoughts, maybe not. Some maybe spirits, all maybe spirits. That's an interesting thought. But occasionally in my experience here, there has been a voice from outside here, like you expect to turn around and see somebody stood there. And this was one of those occasions. And that voice said to me then, get out of your head. And I'm like, I don't know how to get out of my head. So what I did was I imagined myself creeping backwards out of my body as though I was going off to the left. I'd take about 2 or 3 steps and then I'd spring back in. Now I know what I was trying to do was I was trying to get out of my body. Can't do that unless you're asleep and you're in your astral body, which I wasn't, I was awake, or unless you die. There's an energetic cord that attaches you to your physical form. So I tried to get out of my body and I bounced back in. Every now and then I'd open my eye because Nick would moan or my hands would move and the voice would say, get out of your head. I've since given them feedback that they need to say, stop thinking about what you're doing. Then I would have understood. But for them to say, get out of your head wasn't actually helpful. So, long story short, his spine clicked, he moaned, I opened my eye, get out of your head. It went on for about 20 minutes. At the end of 20 minutes, everything stopped. But by the end of 20 minutes, I'd worked out there were at least 3 beings in that room. One at Nick's feet, one with his hands, one was with me talking to me. There may have been others working on his spine, I don't know, but I know there were at least 3. What I did know was that these were invisible beings that I couldn't see. By this time, I was able to see spirit as a medium, and I wasn't seeing them in the normal way that I would see spirit. I couldn't tell you what they looked like, but I did see pairs of eyes later that evening. 3 pairs of eyes very, very quickly. But this was, at the time, all I knew was 3 invisible beings that felt bigger than we are as humans, that had amazing abilities. They had the ability to completely take over my body and be in charge of my body, and they knew exactly what to do to fix Nick. Now at this point, I get up and I say F-U-C-K, 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 F-U-C-K. My map of reality had been blown apart. And Nick stands up and he says F-U-C-K, F-U-C-K. His map of reality had been blown apart. Neither of us had experienced anything like that ever before. And so we did what 2 logical, sane English people would do. We went down the pub for a drink. Alcohol is a brilliant short-term coping strategy because alcohol kills your brain cells. It is an absolutely useless long-term coping strategy because you don't deal with your stuff. But at that point in time, it was the logical thing to do. We both made a vow to ourselves and to each other we would never tell another living soul what happened to us in that room. And the only reason I can tell you this today is he broke his vow first. And if you want to know more, you're going to have to read the book Medium Rare. Let me know what you think to it.